mic, but I'm also going to try to project. First off, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being here. This is why I'm running, just to see the cross section of Venice and the community, and just to connect with folks. So thank you all. I just want to introduce myself, why I'm running, why this race is so important. We also have a special guest and a lot of autors, renowned comic artists, and I also just want to have a Q&A at the end, just to open it up to any questions you have of me. So first off, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Erin Darling. I was born and raised in Venice. Shout out Venice. I'm the only candidate born and raised in Venice. And yeah, Venice in the 80s and 90s, was a vibrant place, right? This was an economically and racially diverse community, and a lot of beauty was in this community, and it still is in this community. And what I learned from Venice is the value of community, is that the richest thing you can have in life is a sense of place in the world, a sense of people, and a sense of community. And despite the problems that Venice had back in the day, it was a strong sense of community. And one of the things I did learn growing up also was that my life was, quite frankly, a lot easier than a lot of my friends. When I was walking down these streets, older boys wouldn't say, "Hey, where are you from?" I wouldn't get, gang checked. Police never stopped me when I played in this park or any park in Venice. And I was very aware that my life was easier than my friends. And so by the time I got to senior year in high school, I was set to go to UC Berkeley, and I already had friends who were from elementary school, middle school, who were already in prison. And that sense of unfairness, the sense that my life was easier and that we could start in the same community, we could go to the same schools, and we could have drastically different life outcomes even by the time we were 18. That sense of unfairness never left me. And for me, it vested in me a sense of purpose, that I have something I need to do something with my education. I need to help others, and be, if I'm going to be a part of a community, I have to be part of the solution in that community, right? So I went to UC Berkeley undergrad and graduated UC Berkeley School of Law in 2008. And if you recall, 2008, that was the height of the Great Recession, the foreclosure crisis. And I moved back down to LA, moved back down to Venice, and I began working at a nonprofit called Eviction Defense Network. And shout out, if anyone here knows Atlanta Pop, Eviction Defense Network. And I began representing low-income tenants facing eviction, because I saw the gentrification from Venice to Echo Park. I saw how people were being displaced. I saw how communities were being eroded, and I wanted to do something about it. But on top of that, I saw the banks basically taking over people's homes and saying, they'd rather have an empty unit and hope for the market to rebound than actually house someone. And fast forward 12 to 14 years later, and we're still in the midst of this crisis, of a housing crisis, where banks and landlords have way too much power and people in the community do not. And here we are, where the defining feature of this race is homelessness and housing. But when we talk about homelessness, and this is my son, Geronimo, and he's growing up here. Shout out, Nemo. He also has cookies, so he's feeling good. But homelessness and housing have to be spoken in the same breath. We cannot blame just homelessness, mass homelessness in the wealthiest district in the city of Los Angeles and just say, oh, it's crazy people, oh, it's drug use. The fact is, there are 17,000 LAUSD students who are homeless. Those young people are not homeless because they're drug addicts. They're homeless because their parents have stagnant wages and rents are skyrocketing. And we've seen throughout for decades that the city of LA is prioritizing market rate development, right, and not affordable housing creation. And so we have a situation where actually city of LA owes over 200,000 affordable housing units, and they can't create it, but they're that far behind. And so we need to talk about homelessness as a housing crisis and its connection to gentrification. Because Venice has been hollowed out by gentrification because of the prior market rate development. And it's not about who benefits in the community. And so I'm running to address this, to not say, oh, we're going to play whack-a-mole and just do sweeps. Because if we don't house people, we're just going to push people from one community to the next. And look, I have a son. I don't want him to feel unsafe. But we cannot address the homelessness crisis by just shutting down a park and saying, get out of here. They tried that in Echo Park. Guess what happened? They fenced off Echo Park. Guess where people go? Here to the boardwalk. It's just playing whack-a-mole with the problem. This is not a solution. So, okay, what are some solutions? First off, we need to strengthen renters' protections and give a right to counsel. So for anyone who's facing eviction, it means that they get a lawyer. Just like you get a public defender, you can't go in as a renter facing eviction to court. You're going to get bullied out of your home, and you're going to end up on the street, and that's been going on for far too long. Second, we need a mental health response team. That's the number one reason when we call LAPD is for mental health issues. So why would we want, say, 4 officers surrounding a person with mental health issues who got guns and academy training, as opposed to a trained clinician who's a social worker, who's a psychologist, who has a trauma-informed approach to deal with people in crisis? Because we need to deal with people in crisis. Let's not sugarcoat it. People on the streets have mental health issues often because it's very difficult to live on the streets. So people descend, and we need to give them the tools. But that means when we call 911, we're actually sending people who can help them. But we also need to have an approach where people get off the streets into transitional housing and into permanent supportive housing. Yes. This is obvious, but it's not being talked about. Permanent supportive housing. And that means creating it in the community. Venice Community Housing Corporation is an example of it, but we don't have enough of it, and we're behind schedule on it. And so what does that look like? Well, first off, we can house people who are unhoused or formerly unhoused themselves, who know the process, how difficult it is, how many hoops you have to jump through to get rehoused. And to jumping through that process, that's a job opportunity. Housing navigators can help people get a driver's license, credit check, all these things that are difficult, that are barriers. We need to be hiring people to deal with those barriers in addition to building more housing. We also need to, on a citywide, take a unified approach to homelessness and housing. Right now, it's like 15 different districts. You got 15 different approaches. And I know this sounds kind of like in the weeds, but the fact is the city of LA does not have a unified approach to homelessness because everyone does their own thing. And so we're playing whack-a-mole. We're pushing people off through different districts. But when we talk about housing, we can't talk about it alone. Housing is related to traffic. It's related to community safety. And it's related, quite frankly, to climate change. Because think about it. It's essential to health. Because think about all the people who used to live in Venice who now commute to the west side but can't afford to live on the west side. Yeah. We need to create the housing so that people who live on the west side, work on the west side, can afford to live on the west side. We need to create we need to create affordable housing so for the people who used to live in Venice can come back to Venice, right? Santa Monica's doing this, a right of return. People got displaced by the 10 freeway or the Civic Center. They're first in line for affordable housing. We need to be prioritizing people who work on the west side, are essential workers, and people who've been on the west side and have been displaced. Because we know how much this community has changed. But we also know that on a national level, we can't put a wall around our country and say, some xenophobic approach, saying, we're not letting folks in. But I'm worried that the west side is becoming kind of similar, kind of Trumpian, kind of like, it's just for us. But the fact is the west side is not just for rich white people. Like, that's wrong. And we need to fight to keep folks in the community so that we retain the vibrancy of this place. And people do need to feel safe. Safety is key.
Absolutely.
But here's the facts. The safest community is a well-resourced community.
Absolutely.
There's a reason why Brentwood has less crime than South Central, right? It's because there's more resources in the community. So let's give the resources so that people can feel safe, but give the resources to the people who need the resources, right? And so what does that look like? So first off, why are we wasting police officers' time dealing with mental health issues when we could be hiring mental health advocates, right? Why are we saying, let's hire more police officers when we know we have housing approaches that need to be taken? So, and also when it comes to transit, the reason why there's so much traffic on the 10 and around here is because everyone is trying to get here to work, but no one can stay here to work, so then everyone's starting at 3 o'clock is lining up to leave. If we could build affordable housing that's addressing climate change by making it easier for people to live here. And also when I talk about climate change, this is the existential crisis of our time, right? But this is not something abstract and global. This is right here. The Santa Monica Mountains are going to burn more frequently because of climate change. sea levels are rising. We got Bionda Creek. Guess what we're doing with Bionda Creek? We're using it as a gas storage facility that's on the verge of becoming another disaster with Aliso Canyon. So we need a transition to close dangerous facilities and transition people to good, clean, new jobs, a just transition. Installing, look at all these solar panels that aren't on these roofs, right? Look at all the opportunities we're missing. And so I'm also running because Los Angeles by 2035 can be 100% renewable energy. This is not like, oh, I'm just coming out with a number. Literally, this is a plan being assessed by the DWP right now, right? The DWP is assessing this, and yes, it'll be more expensive to do it in 2035 as opposed to 2050, but we know with climate change, we don't have the luxury of time. We got to get going. This is awesome. So I want.
You can do it all.
I can do it all. But look, but that's the other thing. Actually, I can't do it all. And we've seen with Mike Bonin and the negativity and the online trolls that, in fact, no one person can do it all. And so we need events like this because it's only with community backing can we clap back. It's only with community backing that can we say, no, this isn't just one person. You can't blame mass homelessness on one city council person. It's like holding the system accountable for its failures means that all the community groups on the west side are holding down an agenda that benefits the folks who live here or have been displaced from here. So I want to open it up to questions, and then I also want to give Lalo a chance to speak. And I also honestly want to take a photo with everyone because this is beautiful, because this is the success. Like this is what we need to see. For too long, especially for 2 years of the pandemic, people have been hiding online and isolated. And right now we hear more about solutions from next door. These are quite frankly, racist than we are from actual community-based solutions when people get together in person. I see a hand for Lydia.
When you win,
That's amazing.
neighborhood council, especially LUPC, which is filled with people who are profiting from land use.
Okay. You bring up a really good point about land use. And this is something that really excites me about running. I don't want your ears to be blown out here. On a granular level, we see failures block by block. Bro, okay. I feel like he's like at the rave going. This is awesome.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Grandpa. So on a granular level, we see block by block, single-family homes get knocked down, or duplexes or triplexes get knocked down, and a big old box with 1 or 2 people living in it, or sometimes no one living in it, right? And on the same street where there's homeless people. Like this is where the basic needs are not being met for private profit, and this is not sustainable. So one, we need a vacancy tax citywide so that landlords just don't say, oh, I'll just wait for the market to be down, right? But housing is a human right. It is not a speculative vehicle, right? This is a priority. But to answer the question about VNC, is we should not be greenlighting market rate development and not be developing affordable housing. And so if we're going to bend over backwards for the city and say, oh, here's a little exemption, why are we exempting just for a market rate house that people can't afford in the community, right? If we're going to bend over backwards, it's only to create more affordable housing that will go to folks who live here or have been pushed out. Louder.
What do you believe is necessary to intentionally address issues of equity and inclusion within our community, and how does your past experience inform your commitment in this area?
Well, thank you. So the questions about equity and inclusion. So first off, I want to point out that stop. Okay, 1 second. Look, Oakwood has been overlooked. Guys. Look, Oakwood has been overlooked for quite frankly, for racist and classist reasons. And the focus since the 90s has been on crime from the gang injunction, right? I remember when this park was subject to the gang injunction, and it basically made it illegal for young black and brown men to even congregate here, right? And so that set the stage for gentrification. That set the stage for the community, quite frankly, being targeted by real estate agents. And so, we can't unwind the clock, but we can take affirmative measures to address the housing crisis that means the people who've been most affected historically can benefit from the new changes, you know, and that's the housing component, but it's also things like park services. Do you know that the city of LA, the LAPD, gets more money for the communications department alone than youth programming? Literally, just the PR for LAPD gets more than youth programming. That's not sustainable. Young people in this park and parks like this need opportunities. And that's not just for park space, but that's for job creation, for training, right? And so this is like a key thing, is like young people need to be invested in. The other thing, and we've seen this, is that elders who are, you know, working class or barely making it have no real social safety net, you know? And so there's actually some amazing work going on grassroots level of like connecting folks to food banks, connecting folks to transportation. And so my point is that there's successful models already going on in the community, and local government needs to leverage what community organizing is already doing and to scale it up. And that's the role that local government should do, is taking what's already working in the community and scaling it up. Thank you.
One of my two questions is what you will do for children in Los Angeles. That was a great answer. My other question for you is that Mike has been one of the Metro board members for most of the years that he's been in office. And I'm really hoping that whoever's on CD-11 City Council, including you, will replace him and be our representative. So I want you to try and just imagine of what you would do when you're elected. If you're on that board, what are the things you would like Metro to focus on? He's focused really much on pedestrian and bike safety more than most any other city councilor rivalry here. So we continue with that. And what other things would you like to do if you're on the Metro board?
So the question is about what I do on the Metro board and transit generally. So first off, we need to acknowledge that 2028 Olympics are coming at us fast. And what that means is the city is prioritizing a global spectacle. 2 minutes. The city of LA is prioritizing the global Olympics and not necessarily residents, right? And so we can't just have a metro that connects people from the west side to downtown and not do intra-west side transit, right? So that means making the infrastructure so people can get out of their cars. So that's bus lanes and bike lanes. People will get out of their cars and onto buses if they see a bus roaring by them and saying, oh my gosh, it's faster if I get in a bus, right? But no one does that right now because there's no incentive. So more bike lanes is key, more bicycle lanes, protected bike lanes so that it's safe. But also we need what's called first mile and last mile linkage. So a lot of people don't take public transit because it's hard for them to get from their door to the actual stop. So that means like intra-west side shuttles, things that address safety. Women are more likely to use mass transit than men, but there's not enough to address safety, you know, lighting, you know, transitions, and also disability access as well. So we need to get, quite frankly, intra-west side transit that gets people to, you know, metro lines.
So I want to go back to affordable housing.
Yes.
So one of the issues, I moved to Venice in '98, so I've been here a little while. And it was very different when I moved here in '98. And when we talk about affordable housing, that's one issue, but the other issue is being able to afford the community that you live in. Because if I can afford the house I live in, but I have to drive somewhere else to grocery shop, to go to restaurants. Because I remember when there was like a barbecue place on Abbot-Kinney and there was a barber shop on Abbot-Kinney, where if I am low income, I can still live here. But you're gonna build, not you personally, but if there's affordable housing here, but I still can't afford to be a part of the community, that's a problem. And how do you address that?
Yeah. So first off, show of hands here. Who here has gone to Whole Foods and not felt welcome? Right? Who gets trailed by a security guard with a gun on his head, right? And so this is an issue. It's an equity issue, right? So these basic functions, laundromats, affordable supermarkets, you know, it's like what is being zoned, right? It's essentially a land use question. It's what's being zoned. Are we supporting community markets, family-owned businesses, or are we supporting things like you know, what you see on roads is an example of this. Things that were like mom and pop shops are now things that are quite frankly unaffordable to most people, right? Like the $18 proverbial avocado toast, right? And so it's just like, okay, fine. There's no shortage of avocado toast, but is there affordable, healthy food, right? Like where I see close to my house is the healthy vegetable options are pull up in a truck, you know? And we need to quite frankly give infrastructure. And yeah, so to answer your question, it's land use of prioritizing.
I just want to say that I am so grateful for Venice. I've been coming here back and forth and chronically homeless for like 20 years, and I'm in Bridgepath, and I'm about ready to transition to the place on the street on Rose Street, and I'm so grateful for that. And I'm like 4 years sober, and off the cigarettes and just give you some identification, and I'm just so grateful for that. And what I want to do is be able to be a part of Venice so that I can use my experience to benefit the community, to bridge us together. And one of the things that I would like to see is policy change in like back in the day before Obamacare. When I owned a home, I had 2 thriving businesses, and I had a mental health breakdown, and I won't go into it too long, but it was awful, and I asked for help, and I didn't have health care, and so that spiraled me down, and I tried to apply for Social Security, and they said, well, you have to get rejected like 4 times, and then anyway, I was alone, a single woman, outside with 2 kids who were terrified. They didn't know where their mom was, for like 4 years before I got any help. And then, in order for me to get help, I had to be chronically homeless, have a mental health diagnosis, and chronically homeless, and be a drug addict. And those were requirements in order for me to get housing. I had to prove that I was screwed up, for lack of a better word, rather than prove that I was capable. And that's what I see happening all over, is that policy change where I needed help right then if there'd have been an intervention then. And now that we have what I call Biden care, this is a crossroad for us right now, because health care is essential.
Yes. Thank you for sharing your experience. And what your experience is exemplifies the failures of the system. Because right now, to qualify for help, you need to be really homeless, right?
Yeah.
And so someone who falls into homelessness recently, someone who's just there, maybe even has a job but sleeping in their car, they don't get help. And the fact is, it's cheaper to rehouse someone who hasn't experienced the traumas of years on the street, who just maybe needs help with a social worker and a security deposit and a little help getting back in their unit, as opposed to like the gauntlet that you have to run, right? So it's 2 things I would say. One is taking people whose experiences like yourself and using this as an example of what works, right? What you've gone through, it worked, but it worked eventually and it worked too slow. Which leads me to my second point, which is we cannot delay and wait for people to be really homeless to qualify. There also has to be a system of giving people targeted assistance when they recently fall into homelessness.
And with COVID and the people that are almost homeless, it's going to be horrible if we don't have an intervention right now.
Right, and so that's the first component, is keeping people in their homes, and because there's a tsunami of evictions that we're facing when the COVID protections lapse, literally at the end of this month. So one of the examples is the city of LA serving as a master lease when landlords don't want to rent to folks, and then they say, okay, well then the city of LA could take over the leaseholder, and the city of LA will be the one renting out to individuals, because oftentimes landlords don't. So let's take one more question, then Lalo, and then let's take a photo.
How would you address the current really homeless campus?
Yeah, great question. So it cost around $5 million to house 200 people off of the boardwalk last summer. And so right now, the state of California has a budget surplus. And right now, the number 1 issue in polls throughout the state is homelessness. And so we need to get state and federal funding to prioritize so that when folks are in encampments, that they're not being pushed out, but that they're being prioritized for housing. And that's bridge housing, but then ultimately getting folks in. So it's that transition that I'm talking about, of getting into transitional housing, getting a social worker, and then getting to permanent housing. And that's not done overnight. It's not like just with SNAP. It's not simple. No one city council person can do it. Like, that's not, anyone who's saying they're going to solve this is not being really upfront. But there's a big issue with not enough social workers. We're not even funding, social workers, by the way, make $20,000 less than police officers in the city of LA. Like, this is how off our priorities are, right? So getting folks to make it easier for MSWs coming out of grad school to like have a loan repayment program so that they can work for the city of LA, they work for a local nonprofit, so that we have enough social workers. And then on a citywide level, also citing affordable housing. There's a lot of NIMBYs who say, oh, not my backyard, right? Oh, let's send all the affordable housing to the east side, to the south LA, not doing our fair share on the west side. Because the fact is, when I'm talking about housing people, I don't want just to send people off to like, Figueroa. Like, no, let's keep people in their communities where their resources are, where they know how to exist.
So, are you for sweeps?
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm explicitly saying I am against sweeps. I'm saying I'm for rehousing people, not sweeps.
But during that interim,
No, so that giving people the option for the transition to bridge housing and giving people like okay, yes, there might be some individuals who say no, I want to be on the streets, but the fact is, majority of people, if given an opportunity to go to a converted motel, go to a converted commercial space, go to a new bridge housing facility, will go. But we also need to make these facilities better, right? Couples need to be able to go, right? You can't just gender segregate. People who are trying to stay sober need to be there's a clean facility, so you're not just mixing people who are using heavy in the same space. Quite frankly, it's temporary. And so if people are there for 2 years, it's a sign that the system's not working. So we need to make these places better and more numerous. Thank you. What's the time check here? I know my kid was telling me it's too late, but so it's,
Don't worry, I won't be long.
yeah. Okay, let's go. No, I want to hear Lala, and then let's give it up. So, yeah, thank you guys very much. And I'm going to get back on the mic. I'm going to get back on the mic after Lala, but I want to turn it over. Cool, thank you. Thank you all. I'll be back on the mic.
Wow, let's give it up again for Erin Darling. Hi, I'm Lalo Alcaraz, and I think somebody asked me if I lived in Venice because maybe they saw me pull up in a hybrid, but then my friend Robert Lopez, Venice resident, pulls up on a rusty bike with a surf rack on it, and I'm like, that's the Venice vehicle, right? That's what you need. But thank you for having me. Citing all those problems, especially the traffic, it makes it hard for me to come out to the west side. I come out if I have a meeting, an entertainment or something. I will come out, but usually, I'm happy in the deep greater East LA area. Yeah, and but all of I came out because I had to, because Papa Darling, Grandpa Darling, Todd Darling, Erin's dad, I've known the Darlings for about, I don't know, man, we're 25, 30 years. We're like way back when.
I remember way back when.
Yeah, I am forgetting way back when. So, but LA was a different place, yet we still have some of the problems that we had back then, and inequalities. It's gotten worse. The only reason I don't know if you guys remember a paper called the LA Weekly, but I used to appear weekly in that, and I love it when people would ask me, how often, you're in the LA Weekly? How often does that come out? What city is that in? But so I used to do a cartoon there called LA Cucaracha. It was an editorial cartoon, thank you, which morphed into the daily strip La Cucaracha, which is in the LA Times right now. And I forgot what I was going to say, but the city, not remember what I was going to say. The city opened up a little bit after the LA riots, the uprising, whatever you want to call it. That's the moment that I actually got into the LA Weekly. Like in June, I started in June of '92 at the LA Weekly, only because of an editor at the LA Weekly, Ruben Martinez, who said, you know what, and we all felt it, like the city is unequal, it's so unequal, and this is why we have these, the policing was horrible, we have all this inequality. It wasn't just one thing; it was everything at once. And so some, some institutions decided, okay, we better open up. It's the right thing to do. We got to open up the city to everyone, and open up organizations, open up institutions. And so that's how I snuck in. I always sneak into stuff through the back door. That's how I got into college. We have to make opportunities for people, and also, but we all need each other as responsible citizens to step up. And somebody that has done that, and I've whatched him grow up since where'd the boy go? It better not be. I don't have no cookies. Okay, you let him on the sidewalk. All right. Okay, I'm not gonna. Grandpa can't babysit my kids now. No. I've known Erin and I've known Todd, but I've known Erin since he's a little older than his son now. And all I've seen is a responsible, most moral character person. The whole family's like that. Most of the time, Todd is like that, but no. So here's a guy that puts things into action. I mean, does tenants' rights, sues the LAPD for laughs, right? Like, and this is like what we should all strive for. I asked him earlier, like, why are you running that? Because it's crazy to I know a lot of politicians. Then they're my friends until I draw them in a cartoon, right? So that's why I can't endorse candidates. Because I have to kind of say, well, if you screw up, I'm going to come after you, as we should all, right? Like, so you're on warning right now. No, but I had to come out and just give that kind of character statement and moral support for Erin Darling, because, like I said, this guy doesn't just talk about it, and man, he can talk about it, but he puts it into action, and he puts the boots on the ground in the least warlike way. Let's just say that. But he puts it in action, and so I wish I lived in Venice just so I could vote for you, bro. But I'll just have to come visit.
There's an empty house on the street.
There's an empty house on the street. All right, let's just squat. Let's go. Who's with me? No. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for listening to my strange endorsement. I love these guys. I love the Darling family. They've helped me for years and years. They have, I've seen Todd up in Berkeley. I've seen him in Venice, and they're just great people. And Erin is just you cannot go wrong by voting for Erin Darling for City Council, CD-11. Where's the cookies?
Thank you, Lala. So just real quick, can we all get together to take a photo? And while we're assembling, I just want to say two things. One is please sign up on the volunteer list. If we're only going to do this by knocking on doors, talking to neighbors, and this is just an in-person thing. So please sign up. You can also just go to the website erindarling11.com. It's ERIN darling11.com. And also, if you can, I just want to just briefly describe this. There's matching funds in the city of LA, so that if we raise $11,400, it's matched, so that it's the equivalent of $80,000. It's a 6-to-1 matching. This is amazing. But I need to get at least 100 in districts. So literally, if everyone here could just give $5, $10, that adds to that 100 limit and that threshold. So $5, $10, very easily done on the website. It's just erindarling11.com. If you live in the district, we need in-district donations, as many as possible. So right now, let's all get together and take a photo, and with the lighting,
What's the maximum?
That's good.
The maximum is 800. That's a great question. If anyone wants to do 800.
Everybody come over here.
So come on down. And then we get some, yeah, exactly.
Jose.
Next to you.
Jose.
Yeah. So please come on.
This way, everybody.
Will you come? Please? Come on, guys.
Well, I'm very excited to meet someone who's going into this building.
I'm going in. I'm
so
so excited.
I've been on the board for 17 years. I'm just off the board, but
You want people in the photo?
anyway, I love it. Yeah. Anyway, the real people that we actually have.
Yeah.
Does anyone feel comfortable coming down in the front here?
Get close. Will you come?
Everybody. Put your knees up. Yeah. Turn around for the picture.
That's okay.
Put your knees up and up.
Might be better.
How about a shout out? Shout out, come on.
Let's go. Let's go. One more shout out. Let's go.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
That was good. Hey, see you. Good. Take care.
Did you hear the meeting I canceled on Tuesday? Yeah,
I'll leave it on for
I
you.
feel out of focus that I didn't get for the last time because I already had your number at that time, and then I remember I texted a bunch of people because I always like for there to be, especially during the conference, for there to be more diverse voices because it seems like the hater voices are very organized.